There are many themes that the founders had that we reject now. Women being able to vote, me being a slave. We take the best and we learn from the worst. As Mr. White has established, House Republicans' version of deregulation is simply a power grab. It's great for gun manufacturers, it's great for the oil and gas lobby, and it's bad for everyone else. This is rich, it's ironic, and it has no one fooled. This is to distract from the real special interest group that is the real threat to children all across this country, the NRA. This is one of the greatest threats to kids in schools. This is one of the greatest threats to teachers and our families in the school system. Not whatever they're talking about right now to score political points, but the fact that our kids are being shot. That if your child, and I'm speaking to the parents of this country, God forbid if your child were to die before the age of 18, the most likely reason is because they were shot to death. I find that unacceptable, but Republicans on this committee do not. And that's why we're here today. Mr. Manfield, very simple question. When did the Department of Defense go through its first full-scope consolidated financial statement audit?
That's 2018.
2018. Mr. Manfield, did the DOD achieve a clean audit in 2019?
No.
What about in 2020?
No.
What about in 2021?
No.
2022?
No.
Year after year, we hope that the DOD will attain a clean audit, and year after year, the DOD fails. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, thank you so much for your service working at the IRS. Very important work. Let's get right into it. Mr. Shapley, you're blowing the whistle today because you feel like the Department of Justice provided preferential treatment to Hunter Biden. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes or no? That's correct. And you believe that Hunter Biden received that preferential treatment because his father is the Democratic President, Joe Biden. Is that correct?
I can't conclude why he's receiving the preferential treatment, but that is one conclusion you can come to.
Yeah, I mean, it's evident in your deposition that you believe that. Mr. Ziegler, did any of your supervisors explicitly tell you you're not allowed to investigate Hunter Biden because he's the president's son, yes or no?
I was never told that.
You were never told that, thank you. I mean, I know we're in your deposition, did you suggest that there's some larger conspiracy at play here, which is what my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would have us believe, that there's a two-tier justice system that privileges Democrats over Republicans. This language, two-tier justice system, has a real history. It has a real history of Emmett Till. It has a real history with Breonna Taylor. It has a real history with George Floyd, the Central Park Five, Derek Diaz, a young man who was just an unarmed young man who was just killed in Central Florida not but a week ago. And it has a real history with the Groveland Four black boys from Central Florida who were falsely accused of kidnapping and sexually assaulting a white woman when they pulled over to help her when the car was broken. The fourth boy, who isn't pictured here, Ernest Thomas, wasn't apprehended initially. He was actually shot to death in his sleep.
There's a decorum that should be adhered to. So, Mr. Bosco, your brace is not a ghost gun, correct? Is this an insurrection? So will they be held to the same, I don't want another January 6th, do we?
Yeah, if
Mr.
they're trying to
Bosco.
overthrow the government, they ought to be held to the same standard, but I think they're trying to express their views.
Whoa. Members out of line. Officers, can we have this woman removed,
No,
please?
We're in recess. She can speak all she wants. The hearing is not being conducted. We're in recess. We're in recess. She can speak as much as she wants. When you're gavel, that's a different story.
I just heard one of my colleagues bring up the fact that this hearing's about a brace and it's not about gun violence or victims or anything like that. And I think it goes to show just how much people don't understand what it means to take a step back and look at an issue holistically. And that's why this is about everything. It's about victims. It's about the brace. It's about the families. It's about the fact that if you have a child in this country and God forbid they die before the age of 18, the most likely reason is because they were shot to death in this country in 2023. You know, Manny and Patricia have dedicated their lives to fighting for a world where true justice can be achieved because unfortunately, there is no justice for the dead. And true justice is ensuring that this never happens again. So this week, House Republicans have us voting on the REINS Act, a proposal they say will reform the rulemaking process and cut red tape, when the reality is that this is a plot to take power away from experts and put it in their own hands. And for those who don't know, this bill would mean that many agency rules couldn't advance without the approval from Congress, and that they are automatically vetoed after 10 weeks of inaction. That means members of the majority can kill regulation without even ever having voted on them forever. This is a power grab by Republican members of Congress with no experience in these specialized agency matters and allegiances to big and often unknown lobbyists. This would be a nightmare. And so let's look at what rules and regulations House Republicans have tried and thankfully failed in trying to reverse under the current process. Mr. White, are you familiar with the EPA's rule on heavy truck emissions?
In general, yes.
Republicans try to shut down the EPA's change in heavy truck emission standards enacted to keep our air clean. By 2045, it would have prevented kids from missing over 1 million days of school, up to 2,900 fewer premature deaths, and a net $29 billion in benefits annually. Mr. White, is knowledge and experience of clean air and fair industry standards a prerequisite for becoming a member of Congress?
No, we trust the people to vote
No,
their own merits.
it is not a prerequisite, unlike those involved in the rulemaking process at the EPA. During today's hearing, Republicans on this committee are attempting to paint the American Federation of Teachers as a destructive special interest group out to harm students. They are not. AFT represents our talented, generous, and compassionate educators who are the backbone of this nation's childcare and our children's home away from home. This is personal for me. My mother's been a public school educator for 37 years, teaching special education. She actually retires this year. And look, I recognize that the pandemic has had real impacts on American children, but make no mistake, for a brief time in this country, children didn't have to memorize emergency exits. Children didn't have to practice active shooter drills more than they're doing fire drills. Children didn't have to walk around with a Kevlar backpack or figure out what they have to do if a shooter were to come into their classroom. Students are begging for Congress to have the courage to act on gun violence. If you care about students, if you care about schools, fight for a world where students are not dying in a pool of their own blood in the classrooms that they're supposed to be learning in. If Republicans gave a damn about America's children, they would pass legislation to end gun violence, to keep students safe, to keep teachers safe, to keep administrators safe, and the staff at the schools. If Republicans gave a damn about the next generation, they wouldn't be actively trying to cut funding for your kid's school and turning a blind eye to the gun violence that's killing children every single day in this country. If they gave a damn about gun violence, they wouldn't be going after teachers over some emails about school safety from 2 years ago. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So audits are one of our best tools in ensuring oversight and accountability. They give us a chance to look at the financial records and accounting documents and ultimately ensure that assets and liabilities are tracked over time. That is, as long as we're achieving an unmodified or clean audit. Mr. Khan, in an attempt to meet the essential standards of accountability, some components of the DoD introduced reforms, including correcting around $5.2 billion in cost assessments and innovations like the deployment of hundreds of bots aligned to financial management processes. Why have these measures all failed to get DoD to have a clean audit?
The issue at DoDs are much more pervasive. Some of what you mentioned, I mean, those are the bright spots. It is helping that DoD is embracing technology and using some of the robotic process automation. It is freeing up the resources to be able to do more analytical work. But the problems are very pervasive across DoD, and that's why it's taking them time.
DoD's antiquated and mismatching financial management systems are a cause for concern. It's part of the reason that they've been on the GAO's high-risk list since 1995. Yes or no, has GAO ever outlined what DoD could do to get them off the list?
Yes, we have.
Go ahead.
It's in the it's on a high-risk list. We have 5 removal criteria, and we've been very specific as to what DoD needs to do to come off of the list.
And there's been many agencies that have gotten on this list and been taken off, have followed your recommendations. Usually when GAO gives recommendations, how long does it usually take for agencies to implement them and get off the list?
The one parallel I can draw is DHS, which is a much smaller agency. It took them 10 years from inception to getting a clean audit opinion. Having said that, they continue to be on the high-risk list because of some issues they're having with technology.
Failing an audit doesn't necessarily indicate that funds are being misused or lost funds. In fact, people can achieve a clean audit and still be misusing funds.